Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanny and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Not too bad. How are you guys?
Good. What's news?
Truly into the real-time Christmas spirit. Sorry, I just got distracted because Stuart reminded me that we bought each other a wine fridge.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful.
Yes.
I'm surprised that you guys haven't had one before now.
We've got a big fridge.
They've got a fridge.
But not one of those wine
at the
fridges,
right temperature and all that shit. Yeah. Fair enough. Oh, you're getting very posh. I'm surprised your wine lasts long enough to be kept in a fridge, but sure.
Yeah,
I'm just
we can
being
tell you about that
facetious.
when we're down.
And Swanny, have you got anything exciting other than 4 pairs of shorts?
No, honestly, not really. I'm just looking over at the pile of stuff. Lots of things are still in bags that have been delivered and stuff. I have to say one of the presents that I like the most is one of my sons wanted a Japanese diary, and it was very particular, and it in and of itself wasn't expensive. To get it sent was, but it's really, really light. And I said to him, "Oh, it's very, very light." And he said, "Oh, well, the Japanese use a very fine paper," and I think he's probably right. So I can't wait to open it and have a look at it because it was kind of an unusual gift for a 13-year-old, but anyway, that's what he wanted, a Japanese diary.
Light until he weighs it down with his heavy thoughts?
I don't think anyone uses a diary like that anymore. It's because he's now my working child. He probably wants to put in his shifts and things. I don't know what he's going to use it for, really. They talked about it in Japanese
Working
at school.
at 13, isn't that illegal?
Can you wait at the start of the year and wait at the end?
But he is. He went and got himself a job.
Oh, good on him.
That's Raj.
Oh, well, he's very much a self-starter, that Raj. Is he working in IT by any chance?
No, but he's working in a little supermarket, but they do lots of different things. So he has, because my mum and I just cannot believe that he's already on a cashier. And I'm like, oh, my God, you don't know how to pack a bag. And I'm like, I'm more experienced at shopping than anyone. I reckon I do it every day. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm on the cashier, but sometimes I'm on the phone and sometimes I'm on here and sometimes I'm
Was he on front desk?
I think it's wonderful. I have such a great experience. Good. But, he did it totally off his own back. So,
well, congratulations to Raj. Good job.
Absolutely, Raj. Well done. Let's see how he goes.
Well, I'm excited about a present I've got for Tony.
Oh, what is it?
I don't know if I mentioned this. I've got to say it quietly in case he's listening.
Jet ski.
Yes, I've bought him a jet ski.
Oh, wow.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. And
that is an exciting present.
Yeah, I'm trying to plan out how to give it to him. Obviously, I'm not going to give him a jet ski under the Christmas tree.
Where is it?
It's at my brother's house at the moment. And my brother, so we're a bit traditional Europeans. We do the big formal Christmas on Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, we all come together and it's a bit more casual, and that's when we do the gift giving. But Tony's always like, we have to give each other our presents Christmas morning. So he's getting shit in the morning, right? He's getting a decanter because he smashed one, so I bought him a replacement. And what's the other thing? Oh, a shoe rack.
I was going to say, throw some socks and undies in there to really bring it down.
A shoe rack, because he's got more shoes than I have. I also have bought a cover for the jet ski, just a cheap one, because the one it's a secondhand jet ski. Before our listeners start to think I'm more salubrious than I am, it's a secondhand one. It's 22 years old, but, nothing wrong with that. So I got him this cover. So my plan is to give him the final, the reveal, as Carla would put it.
Yes,
I've got the key, and I'm going to put that in a box, and that's going to be here's your gift. And he'll be like, what?
What's this?
But for the rest of the family, I've said, you can buy things around the jet ski, or you can even just wrap up some spare bits of shit that the man gave me as a bit of a joke and say, here you go. And he'll be like, what's this for? I go, I don't know, you might need it someday. And it's like, I don't even know what these things are. They're just bits and pieces. But for my sister, I gave her a jerry can and a bottle of 2-stroke oil. Said, but could you just give him to him after I've given him the gift, because it'll ruin it a bit.
So he's got no idea. He hasn't asked for one, or
no.
It's just
well, he's been looking at them himself, and I've banned him. And I've said, we don't need a jet ski. I don't like jet skis. You're not allowed to have a jet ski. It's not going to happen, right? And then he looks at other boats, and I'm like, you don't need a boat. We don't need more boats. This is ridiculous. I'm so tricksy.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, I'm very much looking forward to that. I think that'll be a highlight of this month. All right. So I suppose I should introduce us. I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanny.
And I'm Clarky. And together we are Trial
by
Wine.
And what are we drinking? Swanny just cracked it open as I was
just
talking.
cracked open a little Coke Zero.
Zero.
I don't know why I bothered to put it up to screen, like, because you guys wouldn't believe me otherwise. It's like, oh, right, that's what she's drinking. Wouldn't take a word for it.
And boys, what about you?
We are indulging in one of Aldi's finest, a Cab Franc rosé from the Loire Valley.
Nice. Oh, nice.
Very nice.
What's its colour? Show me its colour.
It's one of those typical French kind of pale orange rosés.
That's nice. I think that rosé I drank the other day was from Aldi. Remember, I had one. I can't remember what it wasn't.
Yes,
I don't remember
I do.
Cab Franc. Oh no, it had. It was a Sancerre or something. Anyway, I'm drinking a Grant Burge Pinot Noir Chardonnay. So there you go. I'm on the bubbles tonight.
Oh,
so it won't be long, and I'll be slurring my words.
What could go wrong?
Come on, Mom.
Game.
All right. So who's got a little tale for us today?
I have one, but I don't know if I would call it a little tale. It's a
big
very complicated tale, and I really hope I can do it justice because it has been my fear in bringing this story to Trial by Wine, whether or not it's something that I can carry off, because there's a lot of different people in it, a lot of characters. But I'll do my best. It's kind of like brace yourself, and it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have a piece of pen and paper.
Okay.
It's just names. It's a lot of names.
When we moved into Sunbury,
and
I set up this little office. Someone once said to me that they imagine when they listen to us that I've got a whiteboard with the red string, connecting all the cards together. I'm like, oh no, I'm not actually an investigator, but sure.
Well, to give you an idea, I came across this crime a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, oh, that looks really good. And I was already working on the last crime that I was doing, so I was quite happy with where I was. And I thought I'll give myself a bit of time to this. And I have watched a Netflix series, and I think it was actually an hour. And I think I watched 4 hours. I did 2 hours last week, and then I did it. And then I went at the end. I was like, "What? How? I don't think that's helped me a great deal at all." It was I'm still really kind of struggling with pulling it all together. There was so much information, so many people involved that I just don't know. So my sources are goerie.com, abc.com.au, Vulture, which I think is actually part of New York Magazine, oxygen.com.
Cracker.
I don't want to say this one, kind of give it away, pizzabomber.com, and the Netflix series Evil Genius.
This isn't another strip search but in a pizza parlour, is it?
No, that's nothing to do with the pizza parlour, to be perfectly honest. I don't really even, that's kind of neither here nor there. It was just as the crime was originally known. So they're the sources, and the first one that I gave you was called goerie.com, and Erie is a place. Erie is a place.
I thought it was like a Halloween
and you will have
thing.
heard of it, and maybe with my accent it probably didn't. So
I thought it was go spooky.
Lake Erie.
Ooh.
So in Erie is I think it's the fifth largest, well I know it is because I looked it up, the fifth largest city in Pennsylvania. So if you imagine you're on the east coast of the US and you're sort of New York, New Jersey, those sort of states, if you were to sort of head inland and slightly up, Erie is on Lake Erie, which is one of the lakes that then starts going to, northwestern US and then into Canada kind of thing. So you're up sort of pretty cold. I don't know if you call it the Midwest. I'm not sure if you do because I don't think it's far enough across. But you probably have heard of Lake Erie or Erie before. And that's where this story is set. And we need to go back 20 years. And the funny thing was looking at different sources and whatever else, it was only this morning that I looked at it and I thought, oh, right. And I read somewhere that it was 20 years ago. Because you know how sometimes you don't make the connection with dates? I'd obviously been reading it happened in 2003, but then I hadn't realised it was a full, it's 2023. And I was like, oh, there you go. Sometimes you forget how old we are and how much time has passed. But this story starts in August 2003. Absolutely. I'm going to try and sort of talk you through the thing that set a whole chain of events into action. So on August 28, 2003, a pizza delivery guy called Brian Wells took one last delivery on his route in Erie, Pennsylvania, before finishing his shift. A last-minute call had come in from an address with quite an obscure address. It was a transmission tower So it was a site that was down a dirt road on the outskirts of Erie. And a gentleman called Brian Wells, who was the pizza delivery guy, who was 46 at the time, left the shop to deliver 2 pizzas to a transmission tower. The next time that Brian was seen was the same afternoon when he walked into Erie's PNC Bank, where he passed a teller a note demanding $250,000. He's got a very unusual walking stick, and he has a huge protrusion out the front of his shirt, and across his T-shirt says the word guess, and it's sort of been spray painted across it. He goes in there and he demands the $250, and he tells them that he has got a bomb underneath the T-shirt. That's what the protrusion is. $1,000, yes. So when he walked in, the people actually thought, and this would make sense to me, they thought it was perhaps like a neck apparatus. You know, when you see people who've had a neck injury or something, you know, sometimes you see people with like a breastplate nearly, and you think, oh, that's awesome. How could it have been an accident or going through some kind of surgery? Well, that's what
collar bombs.
He had a collar bomb.
Oh, it was a collar bomb, right.
It was. But that's what the people didn't realise that when he first walked in.
Oh.
I was thinking about traction, you know, when you're in traction.
Yes.
That's exactly the kind of thing. So when he first, no one was freaking out going, oh my gosh, what's happening here? A couple of people said that they thought their first impression was, oh, that man seemed very calm by all accounts. He wasn't, you know, panicking or whatever. He just walked in, he had a crazy T-shirt on, but they figured that was a part of a medical kind of situation for someone's neck or, you know, spine, I guess.
Spine or something, yeah.
Yeah. I knew exactly what they meant when I'd read that.
I'm worried as to why I know what a collar bomb is now, because unlike Schmitty, it's not normal for me to know stuff like this. So if it wasn't here,
well, you know,
it's been in the movie.
Is it though? Because you do a lot of research now. Yeah, maybe you're catching up with me. That's all.
Maybe. Anyway.
So Brian's in there trying to get $250,000. Unfortunately for him, he only made off with $9,000 because that's all the teller could give him. So I think that's disappointing, isn't it? So he gets the money and he leaves.
It's better than a slap in the face with a wet fish.
Was he worried that his bomb was going to blow if he only had $9,000?
He may well have been. So as he leaves the bank, immediately a number of customers start calling 911. And to be honest, he only makes it a couple of 100 yards out the front before a state trooper pulls up.
I thought you were going to say before he sets the bomb off and accidentally blows himself to smithereens.
Now, this entire bit, it is filmed. So there's different, I presume, news crews and that are turning up. And you see Brian Wells.
So him leaving and getting picked up by the trooper.
Well, no, not leaving. I haven't seen him leave the bank, but I've definitely seen once he's been, like there are state trooper cars around him and he's placed on the ground. Yeah. And they are trying to work out what's happening here.
Do you know what a collar bomb is? Can you explain that for people who don't know?
Yeah, I'll get to that because I haven't told you about the collar bomb. You've told us about the collar bomb.
Sorry.
That's all right. At the moment, he's just a guy who's sat on the ground. No one knows what's going on.
With a protrusion at the front.
Sorry. Right. I'll zip it.
No, it's obviously pretty important.
Hold your horses. We'll get to it.
So when those initial calls start to come to the police, they're getting, there's been a robbery.
So they didn't know he had a bomb on him when he was in there?
He's told them, but initially people weren't freaking out. So he's walked in calmly. He's gone and said, here's my ransom, not my ransom, my demand
Give
note.
Me cash.
So
I've got a bomb on
I get it at he gets worth $9,000. He walks out, and from that point, another chain event starts. Okay. So he is then, pretty much the state troopers are onto him within a couple of 100 metres of the bank, and then the next part of sort of the story plays out. He was handcuffed and he was left on the pavement because they didn't know if it was something he'd done, right? As I've put this on.
Someone
I've got a bomb, and he says to them, I've got a bomb on me. I've been set up. And their situation is, look, we've seen this a lot of times, and quite often it's false. It's a hoax. It's not a bomb that's really going off. So they're trying to get the right people to come to the site to work out whether or not it's a legitimate bomb and then work that out. So Brian Wells is the gentleman who's on the ground, our pizza delivery guy, and he's desperately bargaining with the police and telling them that he does have a bomb around the neck, that he knows, and that he's been set up. and that he knows that people jumped him when he went to gave him the pizza delivery, and they're the people who have set him on this, path of going to the bank to make this robbery. Yeah. So to give you an idea, so as I was explaining, from the outset, it looked like he would potentially had some kind of apparatus for his neck. But what he actually had on was what is known as a collar bomb. But to give our listeners an idea, it's like a large sort of handcuff, but totally around your neck. Imagine it clicking into place.
That's awful.
Yeah. So it was large and it was heavy, and it was sat on his chest. But again, so it's around your neck and it's sat on your chest. And it was beeping. That freaks me out a little bit. So while the troopers kept their distance from Wells, waiting for the bomb squad to arrive and confirm the bomb story, the device around Wells' neck suddenly stops beeping. And he is freaking out. So you can see all of this from different sort of angles where their camera crews, across the road, they're at a service station, like trying to get this view. And you can see this poor handcuffed, sitting on the ground, screaming, going, something's happening, it's going to go off.
That would be so scary.
So mere seconds later, it exploded.
Awful. Oh, God.
It exploded, leaving a 5-inch gash in his chest, and he was killed.
Oh, God.
The whole ordeal was captured on TV.
Oh, no.
And it was actually going live, but something happened with a technical difficulty, and fortunately that very moment didn't actually go out live. But of course they were able to use the footage. So I've seen the footage of it, from a distance happening where they sort of blur it out, and then you can see his body afterwards. But I don't think that anyone was necessarily expecting that was going to happen, or certainly go down in the time that it did. It was all relatively quick. And at the same time, I've seen, the bomb squad interviewed, and they'd been stuck in because all the traffic had stopped because, they had a crime scene. So they're a couple of blocks away. It was like on a busy highway. So they're trying to get to the scene. It all just fucked up, really, didn't it? It all happened so quickly. So there you go. We've all for $9,000.
It just makes me feel sick.
Does. It's quite shocking. If you saw the panic in this man, it was really not good. That is the start of our...
Does it get better?
It's not that it gets better. It's not that it gets worse. It just gets... It just is a lot. Right, so this is a starting point.
No.
The starting point is a collar bomb.
Now?
Yeah.
God.
I mean, I'm going to sentence whoever invented the collar bomb first.
There's an FBI detective who ends up sort of heading up the case. And he says that when he first got the call, he says, I get a call and they say, hey, we've got a new bank robbery at 7,000. Well, they won't say 7200. I don't know how you say a number in America. You know how they call it. What do they say? They won't say 7,200.
7,200.
I think Peach Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is a potential bomb utilised during the robbery. And he said, all right, we've done those before many times. When you arrive on the scene, they're a hoax device. But for whatever reason, this one felt different almost immediately. And they said, as he predicted, this was not going to be any ordinary bank robbery. In Brian Wells' car, they discover handwritten notes with elaborate instructions. And again, it comes back to that stuff that we see time and time again in Trial by One, where I can't write a page of notes, let alone this is beautifully sort of like annotated, streams and streams and streams of, heavy copy, really intricate writing, beautifully lined up, like all of this stuff that is just so particular that you think, wow, that's come from an interesting mind, shall we say.
A beautiful
So in Brian's
mind.
car, the police discovered handwritten notes with elaborate instructions, one reading. There is only one way you can survive, and that is to cooperate completely. This powerful, booby-trapped bomb can be removed only by following our instructions. Act now, think later, or you will die. The notes, of which there are several, the notes lead Brian on a bizarre scavenger hunt, giving him time extensions on the bomb exploding for each step completed. So it seemed like Brian had really been jumped, because he said, look, someone's jumped me, and he actually said 4 black men had jumped on him and done it. That's what he did tell them that. So it seemed like Brian had really been jumped, but the police obviously had to get to the bottom of it. And this is the tale of trying to get to the bottom of how Brian Wells at the PNC Bank became known as the pizza bomber case. It was also known as the collar bomb case, depending on which way you looked at it, but you can see either way. Brian had been able to give the police little detail aside from his name and his place of work And the accusation...
She didn't have a lot of time.
No, and the accusation that someone had set him up. So the police went straight to Mamma Mia's, can you believe it's called that? Of course it's called that, pizzeria, where he'd worked for like a decade. His co-workers were like absolutely stunned, and they sincerely doubted that Brian would have been able to make a bomb himself. They just didn't see it. And then I've seen interviews with people that knew him and where he lived, and he didn't live it wasn't a trailer park, but it was some very small demountable homes, very basic. He was a pizza delivery guy. He had a number of, some of the friends were older ladies who lived, who his neighbours, who he helped with groceries and stuff. He was a pretty nice guy.
Just it didn't deserve that in.
No, not at all.
Could you imagine how terrified he was?
Not a career criminal, not not someone who was on the make. It was something like that. He went to his job. He did what he had to do. Just I say a nice guy. I don't know if he's a nice guy, but that's the way he's portrayed. And just someone who just kind of had a pretty simple life.
Certainly a person who didn't deserve to be blown up with a collar bomb.
No.
Who does?
So the police were able to trace the call for the two pepperoni pizzas to the transmission tower site. And when they got there, they were able to find Brian's shoe impressions and tyre marks there. But then the trail went cold. So they turned their attention to the bomb instead. The bomb was not that of an amateur. It was very well designed, and it had tricks like booby traps and not booby traps, but just elements that were not necessarily required. So there were wires that sort of meant nothing or did nothing. It was definitely made by someone who had an idea of the kind of thing they were creating. They found that the bomb was indeed initiated before Brian had walked into the bank, and it had an inbuilt timer as well as a booby trap that would trigger it if anyone attempted to remove it. Unfortunately, there was no DNA or fingerprint evidence on the bomb that could link it to its maker. The FBI thought one possible scenario was that the maker might have been, a teacher in electronics or did shop, what you call that? I call it metalwork, like that, but at school, and that they would possibly have a workshop at their house. One of the things in the documentary that I saw is you see Brian Wells's family, and just they had the hardest time because remember, all of that has been shown to the world numerous times, every time it's on the news. So it's all there. They see what they would call the murder of their son, brother, cousin, whatever.
Horrendous.
But where it really gets very, very difficult for them is the way they got the collar bomb off was they had to decapitate Brian to take the collar. No. And as his family said, you have put greater value on the bomb after it's gone off than our Brian. Yes. And it's funny because when they first start referring to that, when you first start hearing about that in the documentary, it was full on. And it was something that they weren't saying. So I don't know if it was the bomb expert. I think it might have been someone from the FBI. There were so many people that they spoke to. And he said, and he went very quiet and he said, and we had to remove the collar. And I thought, it was just something about the way he didn't look at the screen.
But why couldn't they just cut it off?
They couldn't.
Like not the head. I
think they needed it together as evidence. And then it's not until, a couple of episodes later when they really start to talk to the family that they're in a press conference. And he's like, there was so little thought given to our Brian. I think it was actually his brother who was speaking. My brother that, they chopped his head off. I'm like, oh my God, no wonder the guy couldn't look at the camera when he was talking about the way they got hold of the it was awful. I think it was like 19 hours after. So he'd been held while they were trying to work out what they were going to do. So they couldn't get access to the body. It was just a nightmare for this poor family.
That is awful.
Now I need you to hold that thought because there's no other way that I can go forward without going to the side. This is the complexity of this crime. I need to introduce you to someone. I need to introduce you to Marjorie Diehl Armstrong. She was born and has lived in Erie her entire life. She was an only child of two parents who ran a successful awning business. But what's interesting about Marjorie is that she was considered a child prodigy. She was incredibly bright. She was brilliant at music and she graduated top of her class and she had a high IQ and had got a master's degree. And she was also very attractive. So when she was a little girl and then certainly a teenager and into a young woman, she was the full package. She was bright and beautiful, like amongst the brightest and, a very attractive girl and a little bit different. not, I wouldn't say that she wasn't necessarily popular, but she had friends, and she was certainly friends with the girls that she did music with. So people that were sort of, probably the other bright girls and the other girls who were doing music. So, she had her strengths, and she just looked like a pretty well put together girl who was an only child and from quite a comfortable family. So life was pretty good. While she was in high school, she had a sweetheart, and that gentleman's name was Bill Rothstein. And Bill also happened to be very, very bright, and he was considered a genius as well, and he was also in Mensa. And at one point, these pair got engaged in their early 20s, but it didn't really last, and Marjorie broke off that engagement. But it did sort of herald sort of an on-off sort of relationship for the rest of their lives, where they definitely had a big love affair, a big attraction. So that, friends would say that when they were together, they were totally in love, or they were, at each other. It was that kind of relationship where it was sort of like all or nothing. And then to be in their company was either a delight when they were the best couple in the room, or they were at each other and just being awful to one another. The fact that they were both so brilliant and bright worked both for them in the sense that they had great interests and a lot of things in common, but it also meant that when they were at each other, they could be very nasty and very, one-upmanship. They thought they were more brilliant, more bright than the other. After Marjorie broke off her engagement with Bill, she really started to struggle with her mental health, and it was in her 20s that she was actually diagnosed with being bipolar. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't something that she ever tried to hide. She was very open about it, and she would say that it was both, a blessing and a curse, and she would see it as something that put her in pretty high company. Like, she would always be quoting people, Van Gogh, or who are other people who were bipolar? I've forgotten who they were. There was anyway, I'll come to that later. I'll find their names.
Loads of people.
Yeah. But everybody,
Homeland,
a couple of
played by Claire Danes.
presidents. Oh, there you go. No, but she always thought that she was in a different class, and that was because it was kind of one of the things that sort of made her not necessarily comfortable, but she saw it as being something that people who were usually rather brilliant might actually have. So it wasn't something that she was necessarily trying to keep quiet. So after breaking up with Bill, she ended up in a relationship with a man called Robert Thomas, but she murdered Robert Thomas in his sleep.
What?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
She shot him 6 times. It's not even a big deal, really. It's just something that happened on the way.
In passing, yeah.
I reckon Robert would say it's a big deal.
6 times?
In 1984.
He ran into my life. He ran into my life 10 times.
Yeah.
She said that she had killed him in self-defense. She was acquitted of the crime because it was believed he was violent and abusive towards her. And I did read somewhere that he had mental health issues as well. And again, it might be entirely possible that he was abusive towards her. And, she went to court in Erie and she was acquitted, and that was sort of, she was, so there's all this footage of her back in, 1984 coming out of court. And again, looking attractive, very much at the time, the pussycat bow, those blouses, very, just, pretty well put together. You wouldn't look at her and think, oh gosh, that woman's, wouldn't think anything really. You'd just be like, oh, maybe that really did happen and she was, saving herself. So that was sort of just something, just clock that up as a crime. In 1990, she married her next serious boyfriend. His name was Richard Armstrong, and she did say that he was her one true love. However, after only 2 years, in 1992, Marjorie was rushing Richard to a hospital with a serious head injury.
Mm.
Richard died of an internal brain hemorrhage.
Oh, no.
Marjorie said he'd fallen, and the coroner corroborated, saying that the death was accidental, so there was no further investigation.
Well, he'd fallen after she smacked him over the head with something.
No one knows. I think he hit a coffee table.
Yes, after she hit him or pushed him into it, yeah.
But what's interesting here is that Marjorie was apparently devastated by the death, and despite settling for $250,000 with the hospital in a medical malpractice case, which I think is kind of what, so she got money there, right?
How's the medical malpractice?
I don't understand how that came about, and there's not a lot of information, but they do mention the fact that she had that money.
They killed him after she'd smacked him in the head?
Yes, so I don't know
what
happened.
He fell and hit his head. Yeah.
I can't find any information about what happened at the hospital, but I think what we need to take from that is just that she made not that she made money of it, because I can't say that
something went wrong.
But again,
she had a case.
That's the second one. You do realise that she had last, and now she's getting it's just a little bit, it's a little bit, sits a little bit uncomfortably with me. After his death, her
so which one was that? Sorry,
so that is Richard Armstrong.
Okay,
you don't need to remember him though. We can actually just leave him there. Okay, other people do. This is what's confused me about this, right? Richard Armstrong. This is just where we're at.
Another one in passing.
Well, kind of a little bit like that, yes.
God. All right.
Her mental health does start to take a nosedive after this, and she really starts to struggle. And it's at that point in way she sort of starts to be deemed as disabled due to her psychological condition. So she starts to receive disability payments from Social Security. She's got the hospital payout. Her father's also helping her, and he also has bought her a house. So she's okay financially. She's being sort of looked after, by the government and her father, and she's got a house. Her next boyfriend is James Roden. James is an unemployed alcoholic.
What period of time is this? Is she still young and pretty?
Getting less so.
Okay.
So
I like the way she went.
This is 92. 92 was when Richard passed. So sometime in the late 90s, I think this would be. And also interestingly, I think throughout this entire time, there are times when she is with Bill Rothstein again. Still on and off, not as much as they were. That was the boyfriend from Scott, the pair of them who were like very similar. They were very similar. Okay. So he's sort of around. He's in and out of the scene. Yeah. So there's a relationship of sorts at different times for them. But at this point, she is living with James Roden, I believe.
Hang on, Swanny. Can you just hang on for a second? I've just got to go and get my other whiteboard because I'm running out of space on the first one.
You shouldn't even touch. We haven't even got to some data. Wait till we get to that. You'll be like going, this is insane. I am so sorry. I hope I couldn't do it justice.
Let me just quickly order one online for urgent delivery, a big one.
I think that she had quite a nice relationship with James. They lived together for 9 years. So that would bring us up to about early 2000, And she would only leave the house sort of once a week just to do garbage. She would scour the neighbourhood looking for things on the side of the road to add to her collection, because what do you think was happening inside Marjorie's home? Hoarder.
Building a bomb.
Like absolute textbook.
No, she's a hoarder.
She's a hoarder.
Oh,
so she only goes out on bin nights to go through rummaging through everybody else's stuff to see what she can acquire.
Look, I've been known to pick up the odd goodie out of hard rubbish, but
Oh, look, I've seen lots of people do it. You've been and not every night for 10 years or whatever else on bin night. No.
Oh, my goodness.
So things are pretty quiet really for Marjorie during that period. I think she was busy accumulating. But then in August of 2003, peace would be disturbed when Marjorie's neighbour heard gunshots coming from the house.
No.
Again.
6 gunshots?
How is this all connected? Nope. 3 weeks after the robbery at the PNC Bank in Erie in 2003, on September 21st, the police received a phone call. A man's voice told them, "I have a dead body in my freezer."
What?
The caller was Marjorie Diehl Armstrong's former fiancé, Bill Rothstein.
Hey.
Bill went to the police station for questioning and explained how he and Marjorie had been friends for years and that she would often call him for help, which is how he ended up with a dead body in his freezer. Now, this is important. Bill said that 6 weeks earlier, so remember this is 4 weeks after the robbery, so this would take us before the robbery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bill said that 6 weeks earlier, Marjorie had called him in a panic, saying she'd shot and killed her boyfriend, James Roden,
No.
after they'd had an argument. And she'd allegedly shot him with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Goodness me.
Bill said he went to Marjorie's, wrapped the body in tarps and dragged it to his van before taking it home and putting it in his freezer. He also helped Marjorie get rid of the gun, sawing it into pieces and melting it down with a torch. The police went straight to Bill's house and found Marjorie there. I've seen footage of this and she's screaming at them like a crazy one. She's sitting on the end of the bed.
Meds.
When the investigators told her who they were, she went berserk, screaming to get out of the house. Officers had to restrain her, and sure enough, they found James's body in the freezer as described.
Oh, shame.
It was revolting. Like, he was literally in a sort of a fetal sort of position, and they had it like it was all wrapped up. And it was a big, chest freezer. So it took a number of days for his body to thaw out before they could actually do sort of, I guess, an autopsy of him.
Good God.
So Marjorie was arrested for the shooting. Where it gets a little bit more interesting is whilst recovering James's body,
it's been boring
investigators
so far.
realised, Bill Rostein's house was less than 500 yards from where Brian Wells had made that last delivery, right under that transmission tower.
What?
That's interesting. Absolutely. So they're like, could there perhaps be a connection here?
Oh, unlikely.
That night, I'm very lucky. Yeah. That night, Marjorie refused to talk with investigators.
Sounds like too much paperwork.
But Bill was very chatty.
Chatty? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
He told investigators he was, quote unquote, the smartest guy in the room. And he reeled off his impressive educational resume, including his degree in electrical engineering, and that he was a substitute science teacher with the Erie school system, specialising in robotics.
He's not that clever if he's telling everyone this.
By bragging,
Singing like a
Bill
canary.
willingly admitted to police the fit for the exact profile of their bomb maker that they were looking for.
Well, you said he was competitive and they were similar. So,
they were. I mean, I would suspect he might have had a bit of a mental health issue as well, because this is all filmed. And he's posture. He's a big guy. He wears like would you call them overalls? I guess so, like denim overalls. Like big guy, big beard, and he's like postures all like this. And when he was showing them around, like saying, "Oh, this is where I picked up the body," what else? It was like he was a tour guide. He was so confident, and she's done this, and I'm going to tell you everything because I'm helping you out, right? But there was something that's quite confusing, and it was covered in the documentary. And he had done like a suicide note, but he hadn't actually committed suicide. So they found this suicide note ready to go. And one of the points said nothing to do with Brian Wells. I'm not sure that many people would put that down. But anyway, that was kind of something that was seen and you park that as an idea. But, for someone who's so bright, he can't help but be the smartest person in the room. When people come undone when they – and to be honest, Marjorie does a lot of that herself. They're probably so well suited. It was unbelievable. So Marjorie is held for the killing of James Roden, but things take a bit of a turn because Marjorie is found mentally incompetent to stand trial in court in 2004. It meant that anything she said might not be able to use in court, so she's now in a state mental hospital, and Marjorie's testimony against Bill would be useless. Shortly after, Bill is diagnosed with terminal cancer, and on his deathbed – in July 2004, so a year after the robbery, or close to a year after, he passed away but didn't give away anything, so that there was nothing useful said. By the end of 2004, Marjorie was determined as, again, knowing the difference between right and wrong, and therefore was declared competent and able to stand trial. But she didn't. Instead, on January 7th, 2005, she pled guilty to the murder of James Roden and was sentenced to 7 to 20 years in prison. Investigators interviewed her in July 2005, and Marjorie hinted that James's death and the robbery/bombing were connected, saying, "If I tell you how Roden and Wells are related, that immediately puts me into the Wells case, and I'm not going to do that." But Marjorie did give up one detail, a name, and that name is Ken Barnes. So we've got another character to add to our...
So who's Ken Barnes?
Who is Ken Barnes? I mean, get out your
Ken
wide
Barlow. I'm like, we're in Coronation
So who we've got?
Street,
Now we've got Brian Wells, Marjorie Diehl Armstrong, Bill Rostein, James Roden is dead in
Richard
the freezer.
Armstrong's dead.
Yeah, we don't
need to remember those. Yep.
I'd like to remember Richard Armstrong. I feel
That's
it's harsh
very nice.
that we don't
Richard
remember
Armstrong,
him.
and I forgot her first husband's name.
Peter?
Yeah. There's just so many names. It's so confusing.
Robert Thomas. But now we've got Big Kenny.
Yes. Thank you.
Well done.
This
We've got
week's
another
Big
Big
Kenny is
This week's big Kenny is played by Ken Barnes, and Ken Barnes is a misfit friend of Marjorie's.
There's always
Again,
a misfit.
Surely they're all misfits.
He's a little bit of a misfit. So unlike uber bright Marjorie and Bill, Ken's a little bit more sort of an odd guy, a retired television repairman. How do I say this? A crack dealer. Yeah, so a little bit different.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean now.
His profile's slightly different. He's really sort of living on the fringes of society a little bit. And I think his life sort of comes in and out of focus a little bit. He's, to be honest, when he's interviewed, no offence, Ken, but he's a bit of a dead shoot. You know what I mean? He doesn't come across as the other pair are mad and, full of themselves and manic, whereas he's just a bit more, I'll take advantage of whatever comes my way.
Right, okay.
If I can make something good, yeah. So he'd met Marjorie apparently fishing. So I've mentioned before Erie's like on Lake Erie. So she used to go fishing and they kind of became friends that way. He was also a crack dealer and he was, there was some elements of society that he probably had a lot to do with like prostitutes and, well, drugs. So he was questioned by police in August of 2005. So again, a year after the robbery. He admitted to being part of the robbery/bomb plot. Ken told investigators that Bill built the bomb and that the robbery was Marjorie's idea. Marjorie and Bill asked Ken to help with the timing mechanisms on the bomb. The weirdest part was Marjorie's reason for wanting to rob the bank. The reason Marjorie wanted them to rob the bank was because she wanted Ken to kill her father.
What?
And to kill her father...
Ken wanted $250,000.
$50,000!
Hey!
Bingo!
Oh.
Her father did have some money and she was
so
complicated. I know.
I mean, you've already killed how many boyfriends? Just kill your dad yourself.
I do think that, right? So she was concerned that her...
Which is the partner that's wrapped up another person's body and put it in the freezer? Bill. Get Bill to do it. He's the smartest man in the room. He's
now dead, but he could have done it at the time. You're right. He's now dead.
And he was dying.
In the moment. Yes, correct. And they think that he knew that.
Right. So he could have easily done this. We could have circumnavigated all of this shit, but all right.
So Marjorie, I mentioned this before, that Marjorie's family had a little bit of money. It wasn't an awful lot, but it was, substantial. It was certainly something that she wanted. And her concern was that she thought her dad was being too generous with other people and, giving what was her money away to others. So she saw that was, there was a little bit more of a time pressure on it, shall we say, spending her inheritance. So she'd said to Ken, I need my dad killed. But he said, well, I don't know how he knew what his going rate was, but he said it would be a fee of $250,000. And so that is where Ken says that Marjorie came up with the idea of the bank robbery plot. We'll go and rob the bank. I'll pay you. I can get dad killed and then I can have my money.
Ken's testimony makes a lot of sense, I reckon.
It does, I think, yes. So remembering that the crime was in 2003, it's not until October 12th, 2010 that Marjorie stood trial for the robbery and bombing.
Goodness me.
The prosecution sold Marjorie as the catalyst for the entire robbery bombing, despite Bill building the bomb and her clear mental instability. Ken pled guilty to his role in the conspiracy and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. And on the stand, he testified against Marjorie. Ken also said that he and Marjorie had followed Brian to the bank, watching them from a vehicle parked across the street. According to Ken, Marjorie also killed James. Remember, he was the ex who was found in Bill's freezer, because he had threatened to tell the police about the plot, which would make sense because he was murdered.
Sense,
yes. They had an argument and she murdered him I think it was like 2 weeks before the actual plot played out, and then had him put in the freezer. On the stand, Marjorie gave a long and rambling testimony, and there's so much stuff you can watch of her online. And I guess it's one of the producers behind the documentary, he was communicating with her for years and years, and she would send letters and whatever else. And, they had how they often do this, had a friendship where, obviously they tell people things, but she never said that she was involved. She said that the investigators set her up and the government framed her, and that Bill was the true mastermind. The jury reached a verdict on November 1st, 2010, finding Marjorie guilty. She was convicted with conspiracy to commit bank robbery with the utilisation of a destructive device, and she was sentenced to life in prison on February 28, 2011. She earned another 30 years for using a bomb in the crime, and that sentence would begin as soon as she finished serving her time or was paroled for the killing of James Roden, Freezer boyfriend. In some ways, that's kind of where that part ends. So I've introduced you to Brian Wells. I've introduced you to Marjorie Diehl Armstrong. I've introduced you to Bill Rothstein. I've introduced you to James Roden. I've introduced you to Ken Barnes. But there are two other people that also factored in this and are also potentially considered co-conspirators.
Okay.
Because the question mark, sorry, none.
So that
none.
four
So
black
what was really
thing was...
Oh, okay, right.
I think you know where
made
that is.
up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And you said when he walked into that bank,
annoying.
he did not look fast.
He did not look fast, and he also had a walking cane that was a gun.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. What was the fancy stick that he had?
The fancy stick was a gun. Yeah.
Interesting.
So what I need to do now is I just want to focus on, because the big question was always, was Brian Wells part of the crime? Was he, or how much was he a part of it? And that was a focus for a number of different people trying to, obviously his family trying to clear his name. There was never, and the way he'd behaved suggested that it didn't quite go down the way he thought it was going to if he was involved. The question was, what did Brian know? And it's not until much later, like 18, probably about 2017, so very late in the day, there is a prostitute who was mentioned from the very word go called Jessica Hoopsick. And Jessica was a prostitute who was also friends with Brian. So they had a friendship. I think that he did see her. And when they went to his house after he was killed, he had a list of contacts, and Jessica Hoopsick was one of them. But she was always very reticent to sort of say anything or help in any way. But, you know, time and growing up, she was very young. I think that she ended up in prison with Marjorie Diehl Armstrong, you know, years down the track. They just happened to end up at the same place. And there was this, you know, yes, there was this screaming situation.
Deirdre Chambers.
Yeah. And so the documentary maker, he gets in touch with Jessica and says, you know, will you speak to me? Because she had said one other time that she would come forward and she didn't turn up. And after being in prison, she gets out and she says, I will meet with you. And she comes forward and says, look, Brian was involved, but he was involved because of me. Ken Barnes, she'd been at Ken Barnes' house, the crack dealer, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you go to Ken Barnes' house. That's how there was sort of that contact. That's how she would come into a loop to know Bill and Marjorie. Bill and Marjorie were after someone to wear the collar, right? So they needed someone who was a little bit malleable. And by all accounts, Brian was, you know, a pretty nice guy. So to get him involved, he didn't really know what was going on. And Jessica has said it was kind of on me. I got drugs as a result of bringing him to the party and getting him involved. God. Because there had been witnesses.
Did she know he was going to get blown up?
No.
Right.
She didn't know that. I don't know who knew that.
So they all thought it was like a hoax situation.
I think
and
they
give us some money and I'll do it.
Yeah.
I never expected him to blow him up. Yeah.
Because there was a pre-meeting at Bill's house on the 27th. So the blow up the bomb is on the 28th. Something happens on the 27th, and there's a witness that sees Brian Wells there. So then they're saying, well, he was involved, and I think he was brought in but didn't ever truly know what was going on. It's only Jessica Hoopsick coming out very late in the day, like literally, you know, a decade later or more, saying, look, that was me. I brought him in as a, you know, sort of a soft touch that would be something I could use, but I didn't understand that was what was actually going to happen. I was young and I didn't want to be involved, and I didn't, you know, that's why I didn't say anything at the time. And then there was another gentleman called Jay Stockton, and Jay Stockton spent a period of time as a flatmate of Bill Rothstein's, and he was a little bit of a career criminal, you know, doing that. And he was doing time when all this sort of ended up going to court, and he was prepared to say, look, yeah, I wasn't involved, but I kind of was. I was there, and yes, I was aware of it, and it was Bill, but it was totally Marjorie's idea. They kind of used that against him, but again, nothing else happened because he said, you know, like, I'll help you in whatever way I can. But when they were building this case, there were just so many different faces of all these different people. It was just one of the most bizarre crimes that they were saying has ever happened. And the FBI said that they worked on it for 7 years. And I still don't ultimately think that they truly know who is responsible for what aspects of it, because some of it's got to do with like the personalities and the mental health of the people that are involved. So the people who are just sort of like co-accomplices are like, yeah, this is what we did and this is what happened. But Marjorie would not ever say that she was involved. And when she was too clever. She knew too much about the law to set herself up to be, do you know what I mean? Like she knew anything that would sort of incriminate her as such, so she'd be able to stop herself.
Yeah.
She knew who she could talk to. She was very aware of what she did. And I think Bill knew that he was about to depart this.
Shuffle off.
It sounds a lot like Sante from last week, who knew all about fraud law, so she could say all the right things to kind of make people believe her. And I wonder if Marjorie's not similar to that.
I'm sure Marjorie's similar to that. And people have said
apart from the hoarding.
There is that.
Just revolt, but really revolting. And she clearly lost her looks and she just looked like an absolute mess. But she was she's just described as super manipulative. Actually, there was one description of her which I thought was really spot on. And this was from, I think, again, someone who was in the FBI. She does have mental illness.
Yeah.
But when you combine this woman's serious mental illness with her personality disorder, her narcissism, her paranoia, her deception, her manipulativeness, you combine that into one person with evil, and this is the type of crime that results. The combination of Marjorie Diehl Armstrong and her propensity towards violence in this particular case proved deadly. And it is very similar to last week's case. These women who are just like, nothing is out of bounds. They've a means to an end. No one's as clever as they are. They know how to do their research, and they kind of get away with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who has a back catalogue of dead husbands and dead boyfriends and and making money out of it at the same time? It seems implausible, but yet here we are again. That is the case of the collar bomb case or the pizza bomber case, depending on which way you look at it. Oh, and Marjorie passed away in 2017 in hospital from breast cancer.
Mixed emotions about that.
It's not a nice way to go, but then what is... Yeah,
no, my normal response about breast cancer is that it's terrible, but for Marjorie...
Of course.
Do you really think Marjorie was the mastermind, or do you think Bill could have had a lot more of the... like, he's sitting there going, I'm the smartest man in the room. I've got a degree in blah, blah, and I've done all these things. Basically, he saying, I built the bomb.
But what motivation has he got for masterminding
Yes, she killed other people. Well, she might have said, I need some money. Well, he was definitely in on it. I mean, who goes and...
She's the puppeteer.
Sticks an ex-boyfriend in the freezer. Oh, really? I mean, you really think people like that are so easily manipulated? I mean, he was a competitor.
No, I'm not saying he didn't
in his
know
personality and
why
wanting to
she
be
was doing
smarter
it.
than everyone. No, he was an equal, in my opinion.
Yeah,
from the story you've just told, I feel he was.
So Marjorie wants Ken to kill her father, and Ken's price is $250,000, and you reckon Bill masterminded that?
And her boyfriend says, "No worries, we'll find a way to come up with that."
No. So she's killed two of her previous lovers.
You just love thinking it's always the evil woman. You've got a thing about the nasty.
Well, hang on. Let me tell you why. So she shot Robert Thomas 6 times. Her next husband died of a brain hemorrhage. Yeah. She then kills James Roden because he threatens to dob her in.
Definitely used the whiteboard.
Then she finds shoot her dad?
Ken and says, "Ken, can you kill my father?" Ken says $250,000. Miraculously, he
says, "Hold my beer."
There's a plan to rob a bank for $250,000. She's the bad
that's right.
one.
He says, "Hold my beer. I'll hold my beer. I'll get you $250."
But that's only one little part of it. She's the evil one. Who's Bill killed? Well, then I think you're agreeing that she's the evil one.
No, I'm saying he's as bad.
For what reason?
Because he built that bloody bomb.
And the bomb was going to go off.
And he knew it was going to go off.
Yeah.
He killed Brian Wells.
I think Bill knew that he was only going to kill one person with that bomb.
Even if that were the case, why did he have to kill him?
Killed him.
Why did he have to kill him? Because they didn't get the money. Yeah. That's what I really don't understand.
And I don't really understand because the beeping started once he'd cleared the bank and everything, right?
It sounds like Marjorie and Ken were watching. Maybe she set it off remotely.
Yeah. I didn't go really into a lot of detail here, but they talk in the documentary about the scavenger hunt and this idea of, you go here to get this clue. So in the 7 years, certainly in the first year or so, they were able to ascertain that by doing what was asked, you couldn't actually physically do it within the time that would be required anyway. It was always going to go off. It wasn't actually physically possible to do
the point? Just
so what was the point, right? That's
just to make it look like he wasn't involved, but you were going to kill him anyway.
And there where's the money going to go? I know. I actually don't understand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right?
Yeah.
You go through all of that. You get your
$9 grand,
and you get
nothing.
blown up 5 seconds later anyway. Yeah. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's weird. That's what it is. And
they were mad.
Weirdo. They were weirdo. Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that. They had mental health issues.
It's just that whole mental health issues thing, right? They're just like a coverall.
Look,
to make
people have mental health
innocent.
Issues, but they don't go around, setting bombs and doing shit, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't. Your mental health may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. It's not okay to go around blowing poor Brian Wells or other people up.
I found that quote that Marjorie made about her bipolar, and she said, "If there was anything for a panacea for me, don't you think I would take it?" She once said of her mental illness. You have to remember, and I'm not just bragging about it, but it has been linked to genius. Lincoln, Churchill, Teddy Roosevelt, Van Gogh, Beethoven, Hemingway, some of the greatest artists and writers who ever lived were bipolar.
Yeah.
So she
and a whole bunch of people who are not brilliant were also bipolar. Your point, lady? It's like saying I'm in the top 50% of intellects along with brilliant people and not so brilliant people. Like stupid argument. Me and Stephen Hawking, we both have over 100 IQ. All right. Well, to sentencing. So from my perspective, I'll do a sentence. Why not? Not so much for Marjorie, but for all of the other players. So while you were telling the story, I had a little look at what was in Marjorie's house when she was hoarding. Pardon me. And there was a reference to cheese.
Yes.
A lot of
government
cheese.
issue cheese. I don't know government issue cheese. There were some government issue items. Yeah.
There seemed to be some kind of cheese shortage or something going on at the time.
She was stockpiling something, yeah.
And she was stockpiling cheese, but it wasn't refrigerated.
Oh.
And there was a whole bunch of other repulsive things that, like, they said it was like a supermarket, only a lot of the fresh produce was not refrigerated. So I'm going to take all of that and we'll go down to Trial by Wine World and we'll go to Peasant World and we will go into the pigsty, but we won't have pigs in there. I'm going to put all of the players of this tawdry, this tawdry, and
we have the eerie players. It's like
the eerie players. This very ill-conceived plot and everything that happened here.
Yeah.
Pop them in the pigsty where they can't get out, and all they have to eat and sustain themselves is Marjorie's hoard of government-issued cheese and other horrendous things that she kept.
Oh,
for Marjorie and Bill, I do think he's. Whether she's the mastermind and he's just complicit, he still made a device that murdered someone, so he's still guilty. So I think
there was signage. There were little signs, little stickers and that on the bomb, like beautifully done. Like it was
sick.
It was done with care and consideration, and that idea of who's in control.
Well, I'm going to strap a collar bomb to both of them.
Oh, that's what I was going to do.
Me too.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't.
No,
what I wasn't necessarily going to do that. I wanted the tables to be turned.
Yeah,
because
the moment when he realised it was going to go off, and the terror that man must have felt.
Yeah, but I want it to be done based on them feeling power and this sort of superior intellect where they think that they're better and smarter, and they're just going to use someone like Brian Wells. I want something to happen whereby everything's going as planned, and then their own grandiose views of themselves, something that tricks them up somehow. And then they're the ones who are the fools. You know what I mean? They've been caught out. So all of a sudden they've gone from being this to being exposed as being not very bright, and something happening where they've exposed themselves, and they're the ones who'll pay the penalty, not, you know, some in it. Not, I'm not saying Brian's innocent, because I don't know that he's entirely. Well, he certainly didn't deserve to be burned. He didn't know. He didn't know. Blown up. Absolutely not. No, not at all. Not at all. I think that's absolutely true. But I would love for the tables to be turned. I don't know how a better way to say it, but I just think that for those pair who clearly would have just used anyone along the way, I reckon, thinking that they were more superior.
Horrendous, Yeah,
let it end up around, I don't know, accidentally end up with the pair of them stuck holding the baby and the baby being the bomb. And then not only were there was some kind of public kind of embarrassment that came with that they mucked up, that they weren't as clever as they thought they were, and that everybody wasn't just a pawn in their sort of plot or plan to extract money from a dad.
Maybe it's like the horrendous and awful experience of Brian Wells, in that it's all filmed.
Yes.
And it's all televised. So everyone can see that they have got trapped, if you like, in their own machinations. And, you know, fallen over it. Maybe they're doing the scavenger hunt and there's some tripwires or something, and they're not as smart as they thought they were, and they're caught in this situation. And not necessarily, I think, to your point, not even blown up or anything like particularly violent happening to them, just more that everyone knows that they're not as clever as they thought they were.
Maybe it could be as simple as when the people get the scavenger hunt, which is so, you know, convoluted, intricate, and all this amazing writing and this, you know, clever words and else, that someone just goes, nah, I'm not doing that. That's shit. I'm not doing that. You just take it back. It's on you. You know what I mean? It's like, because they thought it was, or I think that was probably Bill, you know, it all being so masterminded. I think that would be a great way to go, what? No one's got time for that shit. No.
Ain't nobody got time for
that. I'm not going on some wild goose chase with the bloody things straight over. No, you do that. Do your own work. Yeah. Clarkie?
I'm collar bombing both Bill and Marjorie as well. I want them to go to the Genius Olympics. And so they're in a big, you know, like MCG type stadium. And
arena,
they're going to participate in the hurdles, and neither of them are very good at hurdles. So every time they go to jump the hurdles, they fall over, and everyone in the stadium starts laughing at them. But the problem is for both of them that they have to keep going, because if they don't get around the stadium in time, their collar bombs are going to blow up. Now, the collar bombs aren't really going to blow up, but they're going to be panicked the whole way around, thinking, I've got to get through this, but they're not going to want to keep going because everyone's laughing at them. So they're just going to get that absolute humiliation of doing the full lap of the hurdles, whilst being terrified that if they don't do it quickly enough, their bombs will go off. I think that's my plan for both of them.
I think that's a good one.
It's a physical yet psychological nut punch. I like it.
I think it's important that we've used their inventions. We've used their
we've incorporated their thinking.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, you know, credit to you guys. Let's see what we can do with it for you.
God, but there were so many other people, so I'm happy for them to eat rotten cheese.
Oh my God.
Oh God. Everyone else can just cast of thousands.
All right, well, Swanny, that was complicated. You were
Sorry,
quite
it was very
correct
complicated.
to give us the warning at the front. But a good story nonetheless. I've never heard of it. Never heard of Lake Erie either, but apologies to everyone in America. But well done. Good story. And I'm still trying to work out who was who. But as we say every week, miss you already and Merry Christmas. No,
Merry Christmas, guys.
Ciao, ciao. Yes, Merry Christmas.
All right, ciao, ciao. Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.